Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's solid waste fee rule webinar. So while we wait for people to join, we'll review a couple of housekeeping items. So first of all, please mute your computers and phones throughout the call to eliminate any background noise. Those calling in can press *6 to unmute if they need to speak during the question and answer portion of the webinar. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Please utilize the chat throughout the presentation. When the presentation has concluded, you may use the raise hand feature and we'll call on you to ask your questions. If you're unable to send questions through the chat, please email those questions to me. It's jeffrey.monovan@epa.ohio.gov. And I'll put that in the chat here in just a minute, so you'll have that email address also. If you need a certificate of completion to request CEUs from any professional organizations for attending today's webinar, please enter your name and email address in the chat or email me directly, and we will send a certificate following the webinar. This meeting is being recorded and will be available to watch with Microsoft Teams at the conclusion of the webinar and will be posted to Ohio EPA's YouTube channel at a later date. So thank you again for joining today's Solid Waste Fee Rule webinar. Today's presenter is Ernie Stahl. Ernie is an Environmental Specialist 3 with Ohio EPA's Division of Materials and Waste Management. Ernie will provide an overview of the programmatic and non-programmatic changes to the rules. So Ernie, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to turn off my camera and share my screen and go on and get started with our presentation here. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining us today. We are doing this webinar because we recently adopted some changes to the solid waste fee rules, and we thought it would be a good time not only just to go over those changes, but also to give people a refresher in terms of what the solid waste fee rules have in them. So that's really the purpose today. I'm going to start off by going over just an overview of the solid waste fee rules. So what the content is, what they cover, and some basics in terms of how you operate under those rules. And there's 5 rules that were in this rule package. The state disposal fee is in 02. There's a rule for the solid waste management district fees, which is in 50203. There's a rule for host community fees, which is in 50204. And then there's a rule governing collecting C&D at a municipal solid waste landfill when the facility falls in multiple jurisdictions, and that's in 05. And we did file that rule without any changes this time around. The links that you see will take you right to the rules on the Legislative Services Commission's website. And so we will post the presentation online, or my presentation online, so you have those links as well. The rules, the solid waste fee rules, were originally adopted in 1988. We didn't make any substantial changes to those in 2009, and no substantial changes have been made since 2009. So this is the first time we've really done a major update to the rules. So these rules, they represent the rules that the director is required to adopt in accordance with the statute that originally created them. So what it is, it prescribes the procedures for collecting, remitting the fees. So they amplify and clarify the statute in some cases. They establish the requirements for collecting, remitting, and reporting fees, which I mentioned. There's some provisions for exclusions where fees are not collected, and those are mostly mirrored in statute. There are a couple of clarifications that are in rule, though. And then the fee rules apply to owners and operators of solid waste transfer and landfill facilities, since they're the ones who are required to collect the fees. Our rules were adopted, became effective on January 8th of this year. And when the fee rules are, the solid waste fees are collected on solid waste when it is disposed at a solid waste facility. So those are the 2 qualifiers for when a solid waste fee applies. I'm going to go through each of the individual types of fees with you just to give you some basics and a reminder of what they are and how they work. The fee rules do not establish any fees. That's all established in statute. So we did not make any changes to the amounts of the fees through this fee rule change. So the first fee I'm going to discuss is the state disposal fee, and that one is established in Ohio Revised Code Section 373457. Currently, the fee is $4.75 per ton of waste, and that is collected on facilities regardless of where it's generated. So both in-state and out-of-state waste, we collect that fee on. The state fee is collected at both transfer and landfill facilities in Ohio, and it depends on which facility accepts the waste first. So if waste goes to a transfer station first, the transfer facility owner operator collects it. And then when the waste goes to the landfill owner and operator does not. The 475 is distributed to several different funds within EPA. So you can see that of the money that's collected, 75 cents comes to our program here in Division of Materials and Waste Management to fund administration of our program. So the next class of fees I'm going to talk about are solid waste management district fees. And first one of those, there's two types that I'm going to talk about. So the first one that I'm going to discuss is the disposal fee, which is established again, just like the state fee in Ohio Revised Code Section 373457. To levy a fee, the Solid Waste Management District must ratify it locally. So before they can start collecting a fee, they have to get the approval of local jurisdictions before the fee actually can become in effect. The state or the solid waste district disposal fee is collected only at solid waste landfills and only within the levying solid waste management district. The law specifies sort of 3 tiers for the per ton amount, depending on where the waste comes from. So if the waste comes from within the solid waste district that's levying the fee and disposed at a facility in that district, the ceiling and floor are $1 to $2. If the waste comes from elsewhere in Ohio and disposed in that solid waste district, then the floor and ceiling are $2 to $4. And then if the waste comes from outside of Ohio, the law specifies that that cannot be any more than the in-district fee. The statute doesn't specify a floor or ceiling for the fee, only that it can't be more than the in-district portion. The second type of fee that a solid waste management district can levy is called a solid waste generation fee. That one is established in Ohio Revised Code Section 3734573. Unlike the solid waste disposal fee, the law does not specify any floors or ceilings for how much the fee can be. And again, just like with the solid waste disposal fee, the solid waste district must ratify the generation fee before it is able to levy it. And in terms of the ratification, the one difference between the generation fee and the solid waste disposal fee is if a district ratifies a generation fee of $5 or more, the ratification standard is higher. And then, like the state fee, the generation fee is collected by owners and operators of both solid waste transfer and landfill facilities, wherever the waste is accepted first. So the generation fee follows waste around as long as it stays in Ohio. When you look at the solid waste district fees for both of them, the law specifies how solid waste districts can use them, and there are 10 ways that we often call the 10 allowable uses for the fees. In general, I'm just going to talk about the most commonly used here. So preparing and implementing solid waste management plans. Solid waste districts are authorized to provide financial assistance to health departments to administer the solid waste program if those solid waste districts are approved. Can provide financial assistance to health departments for open burning and open dumping administration. Financial assistance to law enforcement for litter prevention. They are able to provide compensation to cities or townships for solid waste facilities other than landfills, and that'll become clear once I talk about the host community fee in just a moment. And then solid waste districts are also able to use the money to inspect out-of-waste imports. The next fee I'm going to talk about is the host community fee, and that one is established in Ohio Revised Code 373457, paragraph C. This is a fee that a municipal corporation or a township can levy if they host a solid waste landfill, and then the fee is collected only at the solid waste landfill within that jurisdiction. It's not collected at transfer facilities, composting facilities, incinerators, or any other types of facilities. It's collected just like the state fee and solid waste district fees on all waste that's disposed at that landfill, regardless of the origin of that waste. The amount cannot be more than 25 cents per ton. And then the local community adopts the fee through a resolution. The host community fee is meant to compensate the levying community for the costs that they incur of hosting a landfill. So it would be things like maintaining roads and other public facilities that are impacted by truck traffic, emergency and other public services that the community has to have in order to respond to an emergency at the facility, or for a reduction in property tax revenue. So I mentioned earlier that the rules do list some exclusions when solid waste fees are not applicable. And again, these are pretty much mirrored by statute and just repeated in the rule. So fees do not apply to solid waste disposed at a captive landfill. And what we mean by that is it's a landfill owned by the company or individual that uses it to dispose of their waste only. Usually those are industrial solid waste landfills that are owned by the manufacturing company that disposes into it. Waste from coal combustion disposed at a captive facility is fee exempt. Sewage sludge not disposed in a solid waste landfill. Solid waste that are delivered to a composting facility. And then source separated recyclables or recyclables that have been removed from waste fees are not applicable to, or asbestos. Let me go just real quickly through the basics of collecting fees. So fees are collected on the inbound tonnage of waste at either a landfill or a transfer facility. They're identified. Solid waste owners and operators are required to identify the waste on a load by load basis in terms of the type of waste in the load. So is it municipal solid waste? Is it industrial solid waste? The state and county of origin. And then for loads for multiple counties, the solid waste owner operator estimates what percentage would be from each county. Anytime you receive a commingled load of solid waste and construction and demolition debris, the entire load is considered to be solid waste. And just as a notice, we did issue a new daily log form for 2023. So if you have any questions about that form, you can contact the land management unit with questions. And at the end of my presentation, I'll show you the phone number for how you can get in touch with them. Some more basics. So if materials are removed from recycling at a transfer facility, there are two ways that you can collect the fees. One would be on the tonnage of waste received, or the other would be on the net tonnage transported off of the facility for disposal. The rules also have requirements for reporting and remitting fees. So in terms of the basics for those, the owner-operator of a facility is collecting fees as a trustee for the entity that's levying them. So you submit those fees along with a monthly return on a form that's prescribed by the levying government. So for EPA would be for the state disposal fee. It would be the solid waste district for solid waste district fees, or for the treasurer or whoever else the municipal corporation or township identifies as the person in charge. Included with the return, you specify the tons of solid waste that you received during the month for which fees are due, the amount of fees that you're required to collect on that waste, and then the amount of fees that you remit with the return. The requirement is to submit the return not later than 30 days after the last day of the month for which the fees apply. And then the rules allow you to either mail or electronically transmit the return and the fees. Continuing on, in terms of reporting and remitting fees, there are provisions for a request and extension from the deadline for submitting the fees. The request can be for up to 30 days. And to take effect, the request must be approved by the applicable government. So again, it's the EPA, the solid waste district, or the township or municipal corporation. There are penalties for late fees. So the penalty is assessed at 10% for the month, each month that fees are late. And we consider that the full amount of the late fee accrues on the very first day that the fees are late. There is no prorating for late fees, depending on the point in the month. Oops, sorry about that. So I'm just looking at my notes here to make sure that I captured everything here. Gotcha. So in terms of the state fee only, there is a provision to allow the owner operator retain 3/4 of 1% of fees due if they are paid on time. And the intent behind that is to offset the costs that the owner operator incurs for collecting and remitting state fees to Ohio EPA. That does not apply to either the solid waste district or host community fees. So those are the basics in terms of the fee rules. I want to go on and go through the substantial changes that we made with the fee rules. So just to begin with, we really didn't make that many large programmatic changes to the fee rules. I'm going to point out what those are here in just a moment. So to begin with, we did make some non-programmatic changes. The real trigger for why we ended up doing the fee rule amendments was there's a requirement that all state agencies review their rules every 5 years. We hit that 5-year rule review requirement for the fee rules, and so that's why they came up for revision. In terms of non-programmatic changes, we removed definitions from the fee rules that are common to the multi-program definition rules. So those rules cover all of the rules within this portion of Ohio Administrative Code. There are still definitions that are unique to this set of rules. We amended the language to comply with the Legislative Service Commission and our rural writing standards. And then we removed a lot of language that repeated statutory language. The old fee rules had a lot of redundant and unnecessary language that made them extremely complicated to try to navigate through. So we removed that as much as possible and streamlined the flow of it. We did reorganize the content to improve flow and clarity. And then we also tried to mirror the requirements in each of the rules to the greatest extent possible. So when you look at the paragraph reference for one rule, you should be able to go to the paragraph reference for the other two. We also are required to minimize the number of new regulatory restrictions that we put into rules. And essentially, when we create one new requirement, we have to take away two, which means taking away things that say shall and may. We did end up changing more than 50% of the rule language with these rules, which required us to rescind the existing rules and adopt new ones. But so when you look at if you looked at the original versions with the strikeout, it looked like we changed a lot of stuff, which we really didn't do, but it was just the reconfiguration of the rules that required us to do that. So in terms of programmatic changes, I'm going to talk about the definitional rule first. So really, besides removing the definitions that were common to the multi-program rules, we redefined what board means. So previously, it meant the board of directors of a joint solid waste management district. It now means board of directors of a single or joint solid waste management district. And we made that change at the request of a solid waste management district director. We also included an exclusion to the exclusions that existed in rule, and this one is to address a change that was made to the law in 2017. And this exclusion makes solid waste that are approved for and used as alternative daily color now fee exempt. Again, we just did that to catch up to the statute. We didn't establish that one in rule. Another programmatic change that affects all of the rules was reclassifying what used to be industrial and residual solid waste into one category, which is now called industrial or manufacturing waste. So we updated all three rules to reflect that, and it will change the waste categories that owners and operators track and report on their daily log form. It does not change the fees that are owed by the owner and operator. The next programmatic change that we made was a clarification in terms of how fees are collected at transfer facilities. So And this would affect both the state fee and solid waste management district fees. The rules now specify that the owner and operator collects those fees on the total inbound tonnage of solid waste. And then you can see, I've tried to point out in my slides where the new requirement is and where the existing requirement is, so that you can look back to the old rules to see what was changed. Again, I'll make these slides available on our website for you so that you can refer to them to do that kind of back and forth look at the rules. Again, this one does not change the fees owed by the owner and operator. Another change that affected both the state fee and solid waste management district fee rules was how owner and operators of a material recovery facility apply fees to the waste that they either bring in or after recyclables are removed. So it used to be, let me go back. It used to be that the owner operator of a material recovery facility could request an adjustment factor to account for the recyclables that are going to be removed from waste. What that allowed the owner or operator to do was to apply that adjustment factor to the incoming waste to reduce the tonnage on which fees had to be paid to account for the recyclables that were going to be removed. And that factor was calculated based on a number of years worth of data that they had. At the time, we only had one facility that provision applied to, and that facility is no longer operating. So we don't really have any facilities that this provision applies to. So actually, at the recommendation of that solid waste district, we simplified the requirement by eliminating the adjustment factor and specifying that the owner operator now collects on either the incoming tonnage of material received or the outgoing tonnage of waste going to the landfill. In terms of another programmatic change, so there is a provision in the solid waste rules that address what happens at a transfer facility when the owner operator brings in separate loads of solid waste and C&DD and then commingles them at the facility. So previously, the way that the rule was specified is that ordinarily you would collect state fees and solid waste generation fees on the entire outbound load of solid waste. So that would mean that once the two loads of waste come in, you mix them, then the owner operator of the transfer facility was required for submitting fees on the outbound tonnage of the combined waste. What this provision did was allow the owner operator of the transfer facility to request an alternative means of assessing fees. And again, this would apply to both state disposal and solid waste management district generation fees, because they're the only two that are collected at transfer facilities. So the requirement has been revised so that we added in a requirement that the transfer facility and landfill must both be in Ohio to request this alternative method of collecting fees. I'm sorry, I need to take a step back for a moment. I should have explained how the provision works, so I'm just going to go back a slide here. I need to look at my notes real quickly. So in order for the owner operator to be able to request and receive approval to collect fees in this alternative manner, there were some specifications that they had to meet. So one, both facilities, the transfer facility and landfill, had to be owned by the same owner and operator. And all of the waste from that transfer station had to go to the same landfill and only that landfill. And all of the waste had to be sent from the transfer facility to the landfill by the end of the day. And what the approval allowed the owner operator to do was to say, okay, because all of the waste goes from our facility, one facility to another, we can track and we can compare the daily logs at both facilities. The approval now allows us to collect the C&DD fee at the landfill on the portion that used to be C&DD, and then the solid waste fee on the portion that was solid waste at the transfer facility. So the two facilities have to be able to mirror their daily logs to reflect what actually happened. So in terms of what we changed, we specified that both landfill and transfer facility have to be in Ohio in order to request that alternative method of collecting fees. And then in terms of the solid waste district, in order to get approval for that alternative means of assessing fees, the owner operator has to get written concurrence from the solid waste management district. And previously that consent was not a condition to the request. And at the end, it does not change the fees owed by the owner and operator. It just changes some of the requirements to qualify for that alternate provision. And I believe at this point in time, we only have one situation in Ohio where the owner and operator is approved to collect fees this way. And that requirement in rule actually predated the requirement of the approval that we gave to the owner operator predated the provisions in rule. We added to rule because of that approval that we issued. So another programmatic change, which affects both the state fee and the solid waste management district fee, affects assessing solid waste fees on yard waste to the transfer facility. So that all we did was clarify that generation fees do not apply to yard waste delivered to a transfer facility as long as it's being delivered to a solid waste composting facility. That clarification was already in the state fee. No, I'm sorry, it was not. That was just a clarification for the solid waste fee. And then we added that exclusion to the state fee because just like the generation fee collected at a transfer station, you would not collect that on yard waste that's destined for a composting facility. In terms of another programmatic change, this affects the host community fee. So it affects the situation where a landfill falls in multiple jurisdictions and how the host communities assess the fee. So the total collected by all communities cannot exceed 25 cents per ton. So if the landfill falls in multiple jurisdictions, they have to share the 25 cents amongst them. So previously, the rule was set up such that communities that had adopted a host fee prior to the effective date of the existing rule, which was in 2009, were required to divide the host fee based on the percentage of the landfill in each jurisdiction. And that's because the first version of the rule, which was adopted in 1989, only had one way of doing it, and that was the only way, was to divide it based on the percentage of the landfill in each jurisdiction. So when we wrote the 2009, we added another provision that allowed host communities to divide the fee equally. And I don't remember the reasoning why, but we specified that communities could only do that after adopting a resolution doing that after the effective date of the rules, which was 2009. So what we did with this rule package is we added flexibility to it. So we removed those the dates that specified which way communities had to divide the 25 cents, so that now they can do it either way. So it can be based on either the percentage of the facility that falls within each jurisdiction or based on equal shares. In order to take advantage of the flexibility, however, communities that already have resolutions in place for splitting the 25 cents have to adopt new resolutions. So the communities would all have to be in agreement that they're going to adopt new resolutions based on the changing the way that they want to divide the 25 cents. EPA is not able to invalidate those local resolutions, so it has to be a decision made at the local level. Those are really the changes that I'm going to go over. As I've shown you, we really didn't make many large programmatic changes that affect how fees are collected or the amounts that are collected. If you're not aware, you can subscribe to receive updates about rules. So you do that through our online listserv. You have to create an account, which is free. And then once you create an account, you can select the topics that you want to receive notices about. There isn't a topic specific to the fee rules. So if you want to receive updates about the fee rules, you would sign up for either rule updates for the solid waste landfills or solid waste transfer facilities. The downside of that is you're going to get notices for any updates that are made to those rule packages, but you can also unsubscribe at any time. So here's my contact information. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions about the rules. When I was going over that alternative procedure for CNDD and solid waste, it's hard to kind of explain it without getting confusing. So in particular, I expect probably to get some questions about that. I provided the information here for both our website and links to our regulations as well as our main line. So if you have questions about the new daily log form, you can call that number and ask to speak to somebody in our land management unit. So at this point, that concludes my presentation. I will open it up for, did we get questions, Jeff?
We did have one question. Just a reminder, though, if you have questions, either put those into the chat or you could email me directly and we will answer those. First question is more of a clarification. But when assessing fees on loads with recyclables, you noted there are two options on how to collect fees. Can you clarify the amount of fees that need to be remitted in each scenario? A facility cannot collect fees on the entire load of materials and then only remit the fees on the amount of solid waste disposed, correct?
That is correct, because the owner operator is collecting the fee as a trustee for the levying entity, so you can't keep any of the fees that you collect. So if you collected the fees up front, I mean, that's the basis behind this. So that's why there's two ways to collect the fee. You either collect the fee on the incoming amount and you submit the entire amount of the fee to the levying entity, or you collect it on the net tonnage that's getting sent for disposal, so that you're collecting only on the amount that you need to pay for. That's the reasoning behind the provisions that are in there. I'm not sure, did that answer? If that didn't answer the question, please let us know and I'll try to clarify.
So next we have coming in up here is, do we need to update daily logs going back to January 8th?
I apologize. I don't know the answer to that question, but we can get it for you. So we will take a note of it and get in touch with the land management unit, and we will get an answer out.
The next one, just in terms of the PowerPoint, we send out a link to the PowerPoint when we upload it. We can do that.
Yes, we can do that.
So as long as we have your email address in there, I believe we can send out the solid waste management district, so you'll have that information.
You know, I'm not sure if, would I be able to get all the emails from the invite, even if I forwarded the invite to new people?
If we have it on file, and this is Athens Hawking, so we do have her email. So
okay, I just wasn't sure if I could send it to everybody from the invite list, or if I have to ask for their emails.
Yeah, and if you specifically want that, just email us or put your contact information in chat. We'll make sure that gets out to you. Our next question, does the 10% late fee apply to the $4.75 state fee only, or also to the solid waste district fee?
It applies to all of the fees. So it applies to the state fee, solid waste district fees, and the host community fee.
I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. Let me check my email just to make sure nothing's coming through. I'm not seeing anything. Just a reminder before we sign off here, if you do have questions, enter those in the chat or feel free to email those to me. And also a reminder, if you do want to receive a certificate of completion for attending this webinar, either put your contact information in the chat or you can email me directly and we can send that out to you after the webinar here.
If you do intend to apply for CEUs, you'll likely need an agenda, and I did not provide one of those, so I can create an agenda if you do intend to apply for CEUs.
And also, can you put the listserv link in the chat presentation?
Oh, you're going to test my...
And Jeremy Carroll has put in a link to the daily log of operations form. And what is that?
Did she just, I think Michelle just put it. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Michelle.
I'm not seeing any additional questions come through. We'll hang on here for just another few minutes. So anyone has questions, we're happy to answer those. We appreciate you attending today's webinar. If you have questions in the future, feel free to reach out to Ernie and we'll be glad to respond to those. We will be getting certificates to those who requested those after the webinar. So if you need that, be sure to put that information there or email me directly if you want to put that in the chat. So thank you again for attending and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.